When I looked through the glass and saw my 11-year-old grandson blowing into purple hands on the back patio, the turkey was already being carved. Inside, my daughter was laughing. Outside, Noah's socks were dark with sleet, and his lips had gone the color of old plums. Something in my chest cinched so hard I had to grab the doorframe to stay upright. Then I said 7 words that stopped every fork in that room. Nobody eats until the sheriff gets here. I didn't know yet which lie would crack first, the one about why Noah was outside, the one hidden in Brent's leather folder, or the older one my own daughter had buried ever since my son died. That was only the beginning. And if you've ever watched families smile while doing something unforgivable, subscribe and tell me in the comments, because the first crack in this story started weeks before Thanksgiving with a locked door, a packed duffel bag, and a blue folder nobody wanted me to find. The first thing I noticed was the latch. It was the second week of October, cold enough in Connecticut that the maples had started to bronze at the edges, and I was coming in through the side entrance with a bag of furnace filters Brent had asked me to pick up. I'd spent 38 years fixing heat for other people, so when something clicked wrong in a house, I heard it the way some men hear an insult. The patio door had a new lock on it. Not on the outside. On the inside. The kind that kept someone out. I stood there with the filters under my arm and stared at the brass turn latch while the kitchen hummed with the ordinary sounds of family life. Running water, silverware, a microwave beep, Paige upstairs on FaceTime laughing too loud, and for a second I told myself I was being foolish. Houses change. Hardware gets replaced. People install things. Then Noah came around the corner carrying a laundry basket almost as wide as his chest, saw me looking at the latch and froze. It lasted maybe half a second. But children tell the truth with their bodies before they learn how to hide it with words. He forced a smile so fast it hurt to watch. "Hey, Grandpa." His voice was bright in the way scared voices are bright. I said, "You all right?" "Yep." He said it too quickly, and his fingers tightened around the basket handles until his knuckles blanched white. That should have been enough for me to push harder. It wasn't. That failure still sits in me. I need you to understand the shape of the house because houses tell on people. Brent and Caroline lived in one of those big white colonials with black shutters and a front porch no one ever used. Everything about it was chosen for the street view. The wreaths were fluffed. The pumpkins matched. The windows were always clean. Inside, it smelled like expensive candles and lemon polish, even in rooms nobody actually sat in. I helped pay for that house. Not a little. A lot. 3 years earlier, after my wife Ellen died, and then 11 months after that, my son Luke and his wife Beth were killed by a driver who crossed the median in a rainstorm. The whole world inside my chest collapsed inward like rotten floorboards. Noah was 8 then. Caroline cried in my arms at the funeral and said the kind of things daughters are supposed to say. "We stay together now. We take care of each other. Dad, let us do this the right way." I believed her. I sold the bungalow Ellen and I had lived in for 31 years. The kitchen still had the yellow tile she picked in 1989. The garage still had Luke's height marks penciled into one stud behind the workbench. I signed it away because Caroline and Brent said the new house would have space for all of us. An in-law suite above the garage for me, a stable room for Noah, a fresh start after too much death. I put $180,000 into that purchase. Brent, who always smiled like he was doing you a favor by being patient, insisted on paperwork. "Just for clean records," he said. "Tax reasons. Protects everybody." So I signed a promissory note against the property. A family loan. He joked that he knew better than to take money from an old furnace man on a handshake. I laughed. That laugh embarrassed me later. At first, I told myself I was grateful to hear life in the house again. Paige stomping down the hall. Caroline running a blender at 6:30 in the morning. Brent taking work calls in that polished voice of his, the one that made every sentence sound like a boardroom memo. Even grief can hide inside routine if you keep moving. But routine has edges. Noah was supposed to have the room at the end of the upstairs hall, the one with the dormer window. Instead, Paige got that room because she needed privacy for school. Noah got the smaller one off the back staircase next to the linen closet. Caroline said it made more sense because he was still adjusting. Then he lost little things. The right to keep snacks in his room. The right to use the front bathroom when company came. The right to leave his sneakers by the mudroom bench like everybody else. "Just until he learns better habits," Caroline would say. That phrase started turning up everywhere. Better habits. More structure. Clear expectations. Cruelty loves office language. What made it worse was how polished she sounded saying it. My daughter had once been the girl who cried when a pigeon hit our windshield. She used to bring home stray cats and swear each one had picked her. When she was 13, she made Luke a birthday cake shaped like a baseball glove from a library book and cried because the frosting sagged. Then she grew up, married Brent, and started sanding the soft parts off herself like they were defects. I didn't see it all at once. You almost never do. About 10 days after I noticed the latch, Noah asked me a question that didn't fit. We were in the garage apartment I lived in above the 3-car bay. Brent called it a suite when he talked to people outside the family. In truth, it was a finished room with a sloped ceiling, a hot plate, a small bathroom, and one drafty window that whistled when the wind came off the trees. I'd made the best of it. Ellen's rocker fit by the window. My toolbox lined one wall. I kept an old quilt folded at the foot of the bed and my tan work coat hanging by the door, the one Ellen had patched at the left elbow with a square of darker suede because she refused to let me throw out anything that still had a job to do. Noah was helping me sort screws into old peanut butter jars because kids like jobs when jobs feel honest. He held up a rusted hinge and said very casually, "Grandpa, do you still have Dad's blue folder?" I looked at him. "What blue folder?" He shrugged too hard. "Just a blue folder." Before I could ask anything else, Caroline called from downstairs, "Noah, don't bother Grandpa with random stuff. Come set the napkins." Random stuff. That was the first time I heard fear sharpen inside me into something with a point. After that, details started lining up in a way I couldn't ignore. A glossy brochure half hidden under Brent's laptop bag. North Valley Youth Residence. Therapeutic placement. Structure. Compliance. Family relief. When I picked it up, Caroline took it from my hand so quickly the corner sliced my thumb. "That's for a fundraiser packet," she said. For what fundraiser, she didn't say. 3 days later, I opened the door to the mudroom and found a duffel bag behind the boots. Navy canvas. Cheap zipper. Noah's initials written inside on masking tape. 2 pairs of jeans. Underwear. A toothbrush still in the package. His inhaler. The stuffed fox Beth gave him when he was 4, shoved in sideways so one glass I stared out between the clothes. I stood there with that fox looking at me and the room went hollow. When Caroline came in and saw the bag in my hand, she didn't look guilty. She looked irritated. "It's a backup bag." "For what?" "In case he goes somewhere overnight." "Where?" She crossed her arms. "Dad, not every question is an interrogation." That line did something ugly to me because I had spent most of the last 3 years trying not to be a burden, trying not to be the old man who questions too much, trying not to make grief any heavier than it already was. I had paid for half the roof over their heads and still found myself apologizing for standing in my own concern. So I handed the bag back. I hated myself for that too. What happened next made it worse. A Friday night in late October, I came downstairs for water and heard Brent in his office with the door almost closed. He had that low, deliberate voice he used when he thought he was being clever. "No, not until year-end. If the placement starts before January, the monthly benefit follows the care plan." "Right. And the trust distribution can be justified the same way if the grandfather signs off." I didn't breathe. Then he said, "No, Robert doesn't know the details. Caroline handles him." "Handles him." That was me. My daughter handled me. I backed away from the office before the floorboard outside it could squeak and stood in the dark kitchen staring at the reflection of the pendant lights in the window over the sink. On the island sat a bowl of fake pears Caroline only used in the fall. Everything looked staged. Even the fruit had no weight. That night I didn't sleep. Instead I lay in bed under Ellen's quilt and listened to the house. Brent's office chair rolling overhead. The refrigerator kicking on. Rain ticking at the window. And under all of it, one question I could no longer quiet. What had they already decided to do with my grandson? I wish I could tell you I sprang into action right then like some movie father who finally sees the whole board. The truth is, grief makes fools out of decent men. I spent days trying to find an innocent explanation. Maybe the residence brochure really was for somebody else. Maybe the benefits were school reimbursements. Maybe the bag was for camp. Maybe the word placement meant tutoring. I turned myself inside out manufacturing excuses because the alternative was this. My daughter, the little girl who once slept on my chest during thunderstorms, was planning something against her own dead brother's son. The mind resists that until the proof becomes obscene. It came on a Tuesday. I was replacing the battery in the smoke detector outside my door when Noah came up carrying his school Chromebook. He looked tired in that brittle way kids look when they're trying not to seem tired. "Can I stay in here for a minute?" "Of course." He sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the floor. After a while he said, "If I go somewhere after New Year's, can I still call you?" There are questions that split life into before and after. That was one. I set the ladder down so carefully I can still hear the rubber feet touch the floor. What do you mean if you go somewhere? He picked at a loose thread in Ellen's quilt. Aunt Caroline said some kids do better in places with rules and counselors and no distractions. Uncle Brent said it's not forever. He said maybe I'd even like it because then I wouldn't be making everyone so stressed all the time. I sat beside him. My hands had gone cold. Did they say when? He nodded without looking up. After Christmas. Uncle Brent said they're just waiting on paperwork. He told Paige not to mention it because you'd get emotional. I can't fully explain what it feels like when someone uses your love as evidence against you. That was the moment passivity died in me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm downstairs. I didn't pound on Brent's office door. I said very quietly, Noah, I need you to tell me something. Did your dad ever mention a blue folder? His head came up. Yeah. In the garage once. He told me if anything happened to him, Grandpa has the blue folder. I asked Aunt Caroline where it was after the funeral, and she said I was confused. There it was. A child's memory. Simple. Flat. Unadorned. More honest than every adult in that house. That night I waited until Brent left for a dinner meeting and Caroline drove Paige to volleyball. Then I went through every box they had stacked in the locked storage room off the garage, holiday tubs, old baby clothes, photo albums, a broken lamp, 3 sealed banker's boxes labeled tax. Dust rose around me so thick it made my nose burn. My knees ached. I nearly stopped twice. Then behind a plastic tub of Christmas ribbon, I saw a faded blue poly folder bent at one corner. My son's handwriting was on the tab. Luke, personal. My fingers shook so badly I had to sit on the concrete floor before I opened it. Inside was Luke's will. There was also a notarized guardianship letter. And beneath that, a sealed envelope with my name on it. I opened the letter first. My son had written it 6 months before he died. Dad, if you are reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong, and I am sorry for adding pain to your life when you've already carried enough. But I need one thing to be clear. If anything happens to Beth and me, Noah goes to you. Caroline can help, and I know she means well in doses, but Brent has asked too many questions about my policy, Noah's benefits, and what support would come with custody. I may be paranoid, but I trust my gut and I trust you more. I had to stop there. I pressed the heel of my hand against my mouth and made a sound I did not know was still inside me. Not quite a sob. Not quite a groan. The kind of sound a house might make if a support beam cracked. Luke had known. Or at least he had feared enough to write it down. The rest was worse. The will named me preferred guardian. Caroline was listed only as temporary alternate if I was physically unable. There was also documentation for a small life insurance policy, a survivor benefit account, and a trust Ellen had started for future grandchildren after Luke was born. Nothing enormous, but enough. More than enough to tempt the wrong people who already thought of a child as a burden to be managed. At the bottom of the folder was a copy of a court filing. Temporary guardianship had been granted to Caroline 2 weeks after Luke and Beth died. The attached declaration stated that I was medically unstable, emotionally compromised, and unable to provide suitable long-term care. The signature beside my name was supposed to be mine. It wasn't. I knew my own hand. That forged signature felt like being buried alive by your own blood. I remembered the fog of those weeks after the funeral, blood pressure problems, 3 nights in the hospital because I'd nearly collapsed in the church parking lot, Caroline telling me not to worry about paperwork, Brent showing up with clipboards and tabs and saying, "Just let us take the load, Robert." I had signed some things. Condolence forms. Insurance notices. I had not signed that. My daughter had built a future on the assumption that grief would keep me too broken to ever look back. She was almost right. Then my phone rang the next morning and everything shifted. The call was from Dana Herrera, the attorney who had drawn up Luke's estate documents. I found her card in the folder and left a message at 6:12 a.m. She called back before 9. I sat in my truck in the grocery store parking lot, engine off, blue folder on the passenger seat. She listened without interrupting while I explained what I had found. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then she said, "Mr. Gannon, Luke was explicit. We attempted to reach you after the accident, but your daughter informed our office that you were medically incapacitated and had chosen not to pursue guardianship. We were provided documents. Forged documents. That is what it sounds like." The world narrowed around her voice. I asked the question I was most afraid to ask. "Can I get him out?" "Yes," she said. "But we need to move carefully and fast. I can petition for emergency review based on concealed testamentary documents. If there has also been financial misuse, that strengthens the case. If there is active neglect or endangerment, it changes everything." I looked at the sliding doors of the grocery store opening and closing while people went in for milk and paper towels and bread, and it hit me that the entire machinery of ordinary life keeps running while one family quietly rots from the inside. Dana started pulling records. Within 48 hours she had enough to make me feel sick. The survivor benefits tied to Noah had been deposited into an account Caroline controlled as guardian. Large withdrawals had gone to things that had nothing to do with a grieving child's welfare: Paige's private cheer, tuition, Brent's club membership renewal, patio furniture, a kitchen remodel deposit. There were reimbursement notes written in Caroline's careful script: family stabilization, youth support, household integration. They had been billing my grandson's dead parents for their own lifestyle. I made copies of everything and locked them in my tool chest. After that, I stopped hoping this was a misunderstanding. I started watching. Noah had 2 sweaters that fit and 4 that didn't. Paige got a new phone. Noah's winter boots had a split seam duct taped across the toe. Brent took clients to a steakhouse downtown and tipped with theatrical generosity. One Sunday after church, Caroline told people Noah was such a blessing to pour into, then hissed at him in the car because he'd gotten mud on the floor mat. I saw the pattern clearly once I let myself see it: public sainthood, private contempt. That should have been the end of my uncertainty. It wasn't. Because once people like Brent sense you moving out of the role they wrote for you, they adjust. About a week before Thanksgiving, Caroline started being sweeter. Not warm. Sweet. There's a difference. Warmth doesn't keep checking whether you've noticed it. She brought me coffee unasked. She asked whether my knee was bothering me. She suggested we all do Thanksgiving properly this year, and invited Brent's mother, their pastor and his wife, and 2 couples Brent worked with. A full table, she said. We need something beautiful after all these hard years. Beautiful. In that house, that word usually meant useful for witnesses. The next day Brent caught me alone at the kitchen island and rested a hand on a legal folder the way a man rests a hand on a dog he assumes is obedient. After dinner next Thursday, he said, I'll need your signature on a school authorization. Just formality stuff. We found a really excellent program for Noah. Structured, therapeutic, all the right people involved. Best thing for everybody, honestly. He smiled. I looked at the folder. He had already put a sticky tab where he wanted me to sign. I'll read it first, I said. His smile thinned. Of course. That was the first time I saw worry in his eyes. Just a flicker. But that flicker carried me all the way to Thanksgiving. The morning itself looked like a postcard. Cold sunlight. Bare branches. The lawn silvered with frost. Caroline had little white pumpkins and eucalyptus on the dining table. The good china was out, which meant she'd decided this holiday was more performance than meal. A turkey browned in the oven while sage and butter scented the whole first floor. Brent wore a navy sweater over a collared shirt, as if gratitude needed branding. Paige filmed a quick video of the centerpiece for her social feed. Noah was in the kitchen peeling potatoes by himself. He had on Luke's old gray sweater, sleeves shoved up, and I noticed right away that one cuff was damp. Why are your sleeves wet? I asked. He shrugged. I washed serving spoons. Serving spoons. He was 11. Caroline breezed by with a tray of deviled eggs and said, he wanted to help. We're teaching responsibility. Noah didn't look up. I bent and said quietly, you stay close to me today, all right? He gave the smallest nod. The next few hours tightened like wire. Guests arrived in coats that smelled of cold air and expensive perfume. Brent's mother Denise came in carrying a pecan pie and that expression she always wore, halfway between pity and disapproval, as if every room should be nicer and every person a little less messy. The pastor's wife kissed Caroline's cheek and said, your home is just so full of love. One of Brent's co-workers clapped him on the shoulder and said, man, I don't know how you do it all. Do it all. As if grief, guardianship, and theft were one more hobby like grilling. I watched Noah carry a tray of glasses with both hands while the adults praised the house. I watched Brent position himself at the head of the table like a campaign poster. I watched Caroline seat me halfway down the side instead of at the end where Ellen and I had always put the eldest in the family, and I understood the message, present but not central. Then Brent stood to make a toast. Family, he said, lifting his wineglass, isn't about convenience. It's about stepping up when life asks more of you than you expected. People murmured approval. He put a hand on Noah's shoulder. Noah flinched. Nobody but me seemed to see it. Brent went on. And Caroline has poured her heart into making this house a safe, stable place for everyone under this roof. Everyone under this roof. The lie was still warm in the air when Noah reached for the gravy boat. His sleeve caught the edge of the platter. A spoon slid. Gravy splashed across the cream linen runner Caroline had ironed that morning. A brown streak bloomed through the little eucalyptus sprigs like a wound. The whole table froze. Noah whispered, "I'm sorry." Brent's mouth went flat. Caroline's face didn't change at first, which was somehow worse. She dabbed once at the stain with her napkin like she could erase it by acting composed enough. Then Brent said too softly, "Get up." Noah looked at me. That look has never left me. Brent leaned closer. "If you can't handle one meal, you don't get to sit at one." The pastor's wife shifted in her chair. Denise looked down. Paige stared at her plate so hard I knew this had happened before. I said, "It was an accident." Brent didn't even turn to me. "Robert, please don't undermine discipline at the table." Discipline. That word hit the same place as handles him. Noah stood up so fast his chair legs screeched. Caroline hissed, "Use the patio and calm down. You are not ruining this day." The patio. I heard it and felt something old and dangerous come awake in me. Noah walked out through the sliding door with his head down. He had no coat on. No shoes, just those dark socks and the clothes he'd been wearing all day. I half rose. Brent held up a hand like I was the child now. 5 minutes. Let him reset. Reset. He slid the glass door shut. And then, while the table tried to breathe again and someone made a sick little joke about kids and holidays, I heard it. The latch. A small metal turn. Quiet. Efficient. Locked from the inside. My chair hit the floor behind me. Nobody stopped me. I crossed the family room so fast my knee gave one hard stab and then disappeared entirely under adrenaline. Outside, the patio bricks were glazed with wet cold. Sleet had started ticking down. Noah was not standing by the door like a child in a timeout. He was crouched in the far corner by the grill, shoulders up around his ears, trying to shield his hands inside his sleeves. The wind cut straight through that patio because Brent had insisted on removing the vinyl panels the previous spring for a cleaner look. Noah looked up when he heard me on the other side of the glass. His lips were shaking. "I didn't mean to spill it," he said through the door. That was the image from the beginning. The one that will die with me. My grandson apologizing to me for freezing. My body moved before my mind did. I threw the latch, yanked the door so hard it banged the stopper, tore off my tan work coat and wrapped it around him. He was so cold his shoulders jerked when my hand touched the back of his neck. His socks were soaked through. One heel had gone nearly white. I lifted him up. He wasn't too big yet. Still all knees and bones and stubborn little heart. He clung to the front of my shirt and whispered, "Please don't let them send me away." That sentence burned away every last scrap of hesitation. I carried him back into the dining room while steam still rose from the turkey. That was when I said it. "Nobody eats until the sheriff gets here." You could feel the whole room split. Caroline stood first. "Dad, what are you doing?" I set Noah in Ellen's old end chair by the fireplace. The one piece of furniture from my old house that had survived into theirs because I had insisted on bringing it. I pulled the throw blanket from the back and tucked it around his legs. Then I turned. Brent gave a short laugh meant for the guests, a little puff of disbelief. "Robert, for God's sake." He was outside for 2 minutes. Long enough for his feet to go numb. That's absurd. Then why lock the door? His face changed. Not much. Just enough. Caroline jumped in. Nobody locked him out. I pointed at the latch. "It turns from the inside." I heard it. Denise said very quietly, "Brent?" He ignored her. "We put him out there to cool off." He was escalating. Noah made a small sound from the chair. Not crying. Smaller. The sound a child makes when grown people are rewriting something he lived through. I knelt in front of him and kept my voice steady. "Noah, tell them what happened." He looked at Caroline first. Then at Brent. Then at me. Brent said, "Be very careful here, buddy." That did it. The pastor's wife gasped. Brent realized too late how that sounded. Noah swallowed hard. I spilled the gravy and Uncle Brent said people were tired of me making scenes. He said if I wanted to act like a stray I could wait outside like one. I said I was cold and he said maybe that would help me remember things. Silence. The kind you can hear in your teeth. Caroline rushed forward. "That is not what was meant." "Then tell us what was meant," I said. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. What happened next was the part they never saw coming. I walked to the sideboard where I had left the legal folder Brent wanted me to sign and placed it on the table beside the platter of turkey. Then I took the blue folder from under my arm and set it on top. Brent's eyes flicked to it and for the first time all day he looked afraid. I said, "Before anyone here swallows another bite of food my grandson was forced to serve, I want the truth in the room." Caroline's face drained. Dad, not like this. I almost laughed at that. Not like this. As if there had been a dignified slot on the calendar for discovering your child locked another child in the cold. I opened Luke's letter and held it up. My son wrote this before he died. He named me Noah's guardian. Me. Not you. Denise let out a low breath. The pastor actually took a step back from the table. Caroline whispered, "You don't understand?" "No," I said. "I understand finally." I laid out the next document. "This is the temporary guardianship filing you submitted after Luke's funeral. The one saying I was too medically unstable to care for Noah long term. There's a signature on it supposed to be mine. It isn't." Brent reached for the papers. I put my hand over them first. "Don't?" Something in my voice must have carried because he stopped. I looked around the table at every witness Brent had invited to admire his generosity. They hid my son's will. They forged consent. And while telling people they'd stepped up for family, they used Noah's survivor benefits and trust funds to pay for this house, this table, their upgrades, their club membership, their life. "That's a lie," Brent snapped. "Is it?" I pulled out copies of the account records. Dana had highlighted the withdrawals in yellow. Even from across the table, the pages looked dirty. Brent's coworker leaned in before he could stop himself. Caroline said, "Household expenses count. He lives here." "Noah's boots are taped at the toe," I said. "Paige has had 2 new phones." Paige burst out, "I told you this was bad." Every adult turned to her. Too late, she slapped a hand over her mouth. Caroline stared at her daughter. "Paige." But once the first truth comes out, the rest get jealous. Paige started crying. "You told me not to say anything. You said Grandpa would ruin everything if he found out about the school, and Mom, you said Noah should be grateful because at least you took him in when nobody else wanted." Caroline shouted, "Enough." Noah curled deeper into my coat. There are moments when a family stops being a family and becomes a crime scene with casserole dishes. I took my phone from my pocket and hit speaker. Dana answered on the second ring. "Mr. Gannon? You're on speaker," I said. "Can you repeat what you told me?" Pause. Then, crisp and professional, "We have filed an emergency petition with the probate court based on concealed guardianship documents, suspected forgery and misuse of funds belonging to Noah Gannon. A protective hold has been placed on the trust pending review. Child Services has also been notified." Brent lunged then not at me but for the phone. The pastor stepped between us before I even moved. I still remember that. The shock on Brent's face that another man had decided in one clean second who he was. Brent barked, "This is insane. We have given that boy everything." From the chair by the fireplace, Noah whispered, "Then why do you keep saying I cost too much?" Nobody spoke. Brent looked at him like he had forgotten children have ears. That one sentence from Noah landed harder than all my papers. Because facts can be argued. A child's memory of being treated like a bill cannot. I said, "Tell them about Monday." Brent's head jerked toward me. "What?" "The program. The paperwork you wanted me to sign after dinner." Caroline tried a new tone then. Soft. Injured. The voice people use when they sense authority slipping and go fishing for sympathy. "We were trying to get him help. He has been difficult, Dad. You only see the sweet side. We deal with the meltdowns, the acting out, the grief." "Grief isn't bad behavior," I said. "And children do not heal by being hidden." Her eyes flashed. "There are things you don't know." "Then say them." She couldn't. Because there was nothing to say that didn't reveal exactly who she had become. Brent recovered enough to straighten his shoulders. "This is still our house." I looked him right in the eye. "No. It's the bank's house mostly. And the rest of it is tied to a note you signed with me when you took my money." Dana called that too. That landed like a dropped plate. Brent blinked. "You wouldn't." I thought of Noah on those wet bricks. Of Luke's handwriting asking me from beyond his own grave to trust what he had already seen in Brent. Of Caroline telling me I was random stuff whenever concern interrupted her comfort. I already did. He took a step toward me. Then the doorbell rang. Nobody moved. It rang again. Denise sat down very slowly like her knees had stopped negotiating with her. The pastor's wife covered her mouth. Paige cried harder. I went to the front door myself. The sheriff stood there with a child services caseworker beside him, both carrying the cold in with them. Behind them, sleet feathered across the porch rail. "Mr. Gannon?" "Yes." He looked past me at the dining room, at the set table, the gathered guests, the little boy wrapped in a work coat by the fire. "We're here regarding a welfare report." Brent found his voice. "Officer, this is a family misunderstanding. The sheriff stepped inside and glanced toward the patio, then back to Noah's wet socks on the hearth. I guess we'll sort that out. What followed happened as one long, brutal unwinding. The caseworker knelt beside Noah and spoke to him in a low, calm voice while the sheriff asked who had locked the patio door. Brent denied it. Caroline denied seeing it. Then Paige, blotchy and shaking, said, "Dad turned it. I heard it." Denise started crying into a napkin. The pastor quietly told the sheriff he had heard Brent describe the punishment as discipline. One of Brent's co-workers said he'd be glad to provide a statement about the school paperwork because he'd seen the folder and heard part of the conversation. Brent tried every version of the same man. Offended host. Concerned father figure. Misunderstood disciplinarian. Victim of an overreactive old man. None of them worked. The child services woman asked Noah whether being put outside had happened before. He stared at the floor and said, "In the rain once. Not this long." Caroline sat down hard like someone had unplugged her. The sheriff asked for access to financial documents related to Noah's accounts. Brent demanded a warrant in the tone men use when they think vocabulary can still save them. The sheriff said, "Then don't touch anything," and suddenly Brent seemed to realize that his beautiful house was now full of witnesses who would remember his face exactly as it looked in that moment. Cornered. Not important. Not generous. Not admired. Just cornered. When the caseworker asked Noah where he wanted to go for the night, he looked at me. No child should have to ask that with his eyes. I said, "You come with me." Caroline stood so fast her chair toppled. "You can't just take him." Dana, still on speaker from where my phone lay on the table among the ruined centerpiece and stained runner, answered for me. "Actually," she said, "given the petition and current conditions, temporary kinship transfer to Mr. Gannon is exactly what I'm requesting." Caroline pressed both hands to her mouth. For one flickering second I saw my daughter as a little girl again, caught, frightened, no idea how to undo what she had done. And because I am still her father no matter how much she did to deserve otherwise, that hurt. Then Noah shivered in my coat, and the hurt hardened into clarity. Caroline looked at me with tears finally breaking loose. "Dad, please. Don't destroy us over one mistake." I said the truest thing I said all year. "You didn't make one mistake. You built a life around him being less human than you." Even Brent had no comeback for that. I carried Noah's duffel bag down from the mudroom myself. They had packed it neatly. Labels on the side pocket. Medication in a plastic pouch. As if organization could make betrayal clean. Before I left, I walked back to the fireplace, took Ellen's chair by the arm, and looked once around that dining room. The polished silver, the half-carved turkey, the glasses still sweating, the eucalyptus centerpiece streaked brown with gravy and truth. Then I took Noah's hand and led him out. He was still wrapped in my patched coat. He kept one hand buried in the left pocket where Ellen's crooked stitching had always rubbed smooth under my thumb. That winter was not easy. I don't want to lie just because endings sound better when they glide. Noah had nightmares. He hid food under his pillow for almost 3 months. The first time I left him with my neighbor Mrs. Alvarez so I could meet Dana at the courthouse. He asked whether I was coming back before the front door had even shut. He cried in the sporting goods aisle when I bought him new boots because he thought they were too expensive. For a while, whenever soup simmered, he came into the kitchen every 10 minutes to make sure it was still for everybody. Children learn scarcity fast when love is rationed. But children can relearn safety too if the safety is real. Dana moved like fire through dry grass once she had ground to stand on. Luke's will was admitted. The forged declaration became a separate problem all its own. The court ordered an accounting of every dollar Caroline and Brent had touched in Noah's name. The trust was restored what it could restore. The rest came out of settlements, penalties, and the very house they had tried to use as a stage set for generosity. My recorded loan against the property turned out to matter a great deal once all the other lies came to light. Brent resigned from his firm before they could finish pretending the decision was mutual. Their church stopped putting Caroline on charity committees. Funny how fast image collapses once the labor of hiding truth gets interrupted. People asked me whether I felt guilty. I expected to. I didn't. I felt old. Tired. Sad sometimes in the kind of slow, deep way that comes from understanding too late. But guilt? No. Not for pulling a child out of the cold. Not for reading what my dead son tried to leave in my hands. Not for finally behaving like the father he believed I was. We moved in March to a small brick house 2 towns over with a porch swing and a furnace older than both of us put together. It clicked and banged and needed coaxing, which suited me fine. Noah picked the room at the back because it got morning light. Mrs. Alvarez's son painted the walls blue for him. Not baby blue, not nursery blue, but the dark lake color just before evening. We put Luke's baseball glove on one shelf and Beth's fox on the bed. Noah asked if we could keep the kitchen table scarred instead of refinishing it, so we don't have to panic if something spills. I said that sounded perfect. The first time he laughed without checking whether it was allowed, I had to go into the garage and stand by myself for a minute. By summer he was sleeping through most nights. By fall he joined hockey again. He was terrible the first few weeks because grief had stolen whole seasons from him, but he loved the cold air and the noise of blades on ice. On the drive home he would talk with his hands, red-cheeked and loose, and sometimes in those moments I could hear Luke so clearly it felt less like pain and more like company. Caroline wrote twice. The first letter was all explanation. Stress. Miscommunication. Pressure. Brett. The complexity of grief. The difficulty of raising a traumatized child. I read it once and put it away. The second letter was shorter. It said, I don't know when practicality became cruelty in my mouth. That one I believed. Believing it did not erase what she had done. But truth, when it finally arrives, rarely comes dressed as redemption. Sometimes it's just accuracy. Sometimes that has to be enough. I let Noah decide what contact he wanted. For a long time the answer was none. Paige came once on her own with a grocery store bouquet and mascara-smudged eyes. She stood on my porch and said, I should have told you earlier. Noah listened from the hallway and did not come out. I told her she would have to live long enough to become better than the house she was raised in. She cried harder, but I think she heard me. A year later, Thanksgiving came around again. I dreaded it until the day itself arrived. Then it was just weather and work and an honest kitchen. Noah and I made too much food on purpose. Mrs. Alvarez brought flan because she said pie is insecure and needs competition. My friend Harold from the old furnace shop came over with his wife and a jar of pickled beans nobody touched but everybody praised. There were no matching napkins. The gravy broke once and had to be whisked back together. Somebody tracked leaves onto the floor. Noah dropped a spoon and looked up for half a second out of habit. I just handed him another one. He smiled. After we ate, snow began to come down past the window over the sink in those slow, fat flakes that make the whole world look like it's finally lowering its voice. Noah stood by the front door pulling on his boots because he wanted to see the first layer settle on the porch rail. He reached for my old tan work coat without asking. It swallowed him the way good things should, roomy, warm, made for use instead of display. He shoved his hands into the pockets and laughed when his fingers found a loose screw I'd forgotten to empty out. Ellen's patch was still there on the elbow. Noah looked back at me and said, Grandpa, it still smells like your garage. I said, that's how you know it's worth keeping. He grinned and ran outside into the clean cold where nobody was locking any doors behind him. And for the first time in a long time, watching him through the glass didn't feel like helplessness. It felt like peace. The kind you earn late. The kind that stays warm. The kind that finally knows what family is.